Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I want to wish you a warm welcome on behalf of IOM to this regional conference, and it's my pleasure and honor to be here with you. First and foremost, let me thank the Montenegrin authorities for hosting us today in beautiful Budva, despite the wind. We always enjoy coming here. And also want to thank, of course, our colleagues from the Danish government who are online and are supporting us for this event today. And of course, all our key partners involved today, particularly GIZ, very engaged partners in the area of counter-human trafficking, and this testifies the need of working together in synergy on this complex crime. IOM has more than 30 years of experience in the fight against trafficking and anti-smuggling efforts. One of the key value added of IOM is this direct relationship with victims of trafficking, because we do provide immediate assistance and protection to those tons growing victims of trafficking, unfortunately, throughout the world. This year, IOM has launched quite a very innovative and interesting initiative together with Microsoft that looks at this very unique relationship between the trafficker, the perpetrator, I would say, and the victim or the survivor. We've analyzed between 2005 and 2022 more than 17,000 victims of trafficking testimony, 35,000 persecutors also testimonies, and this has allowed us to reach a wider knowledge of how much trafficking and smuggling trends are evolving, are getting more complex, are getting more involved into the digital era, and that's the reason why also this conference is having a strong focus on digital technology and how much we can use digital technology also to counter those who are using it for their own profit. But one of the questions that I hope during this conference we can all ask to ourselves is why, after so many years of increased efforts in the fight against trafficking and smuggling, the profits of smugglers and traffickers are growing and the phenomenon continues to exist. Some of possible responses are the rate of criminal investigation is still very low. The number of indictments continue to be extremely low. The numbers of UNODC in 2020 were saying that there was a decrease of investigation and indictment of 11%. Another element is obviously COVID-19 and how much COVID-19 has strengthened vulnerability, has changed some of the key operating modus operandi of the traffickers to the detriment of the vulnerabilities of the victims. And last but not least, and I'm sure we'll talk about it a lot, is the fact that most of the efforts, successful efforts to combat trafficking rely on the victims' testimonies, rely on the relationship with the victims, and oftentimes victims tend to drop out of the proceedings, or obviously there is no maybe operating environment that allows this work to happen smoothly with the victims. In the Western Balkans, we've been very engaged in the fight against trafficking and smuggling since more or less the establishment of our offices in the region, which is in the 90s. We've done an enormous amount of work with the government, with you, authorities and institutions of the Western Balkans to fight trafficking. A number of bilateral efforts have been growing in terms of counter-human trafficking task forces, exchanges of best practices. We've had also very good new innovative initiatives piloted by some governments. I want to quote Bosnia-Herzegovina application a digital application that allows to best identify victims of trafficking, and how much this has helped to strengthen overall awareness on this fight. So a lot has been done. And since the beginning of the migratory flows, I would say 2015, 2016, where more than 1.5 million migrants have transited through the Western Balkans, our partners have also looked increasingly on how to tackle trafficking and smuggling within the migratory flows. Mr. Dragan has mentioned that 2022 has been an important year where we've seen a massive increase of arrivals in the Western Balkans. More than 45% of irregular entries in Europe have passed through the Western Balkans, and so this testifies of the need of increasing identification, protection, and assistance also throughout the migratory routes and the Balkan route in the Western Balkans. This year, in 2022, IOM launched also a survey to dig deeper into some of the possible risks of trafficking across the migratory route. And we've seen some shifts in this route. First of all, we received an increasing number of entries also via Bulgaria, and also an increasing number of people testifying of being at risk of trafficking. In fact, just to give you a few numbers, of the 1,069 people interviewed in 2022, at least 20% were saying being exposed to violence, exploitation, and abuse throughout their journeys, and some of them also identifying trafficking specifically as one form of specific threat to them. So obviously we need to address urgently and together the issue of trafficking and smuggling also across the migratory routes. It has been said already, we've done a number of efforts collectively with you to gather momentum around the fight against trafficking and smuggling in the Western Balkans. In fact, last year we gathered ministers from the Western Balkans in Skopje who have adopted a resolution, a declaration that also engages them collectively in the fight against trafficking and smuggling, looking specifically at new digital technologies and how they could be used to tackle the issue. The same declaration was also, in a way, included and integrated in the Western Balkan EU action plan that has been adopted later on in Tirana in December, and also trafficking and smuggling features very high in that action plan. So this represents very much our blueprint for the future. Of course, our efforts will continue most importantly across the migratory route in a route-based approach and human rights-based approach to fighting trafficking and smuggling. We will continue to be closer to the victims, try to identify, support the frontline workers like you to better identify victims of trafficking, but also gather key experts to better also increase the level of investigation and prosecution and indictments. Last, I just want to conclude by encouraging increasingly institution partners, Western Balkans partners, to shift a little bit the narrative when it comes to tackling migratory flows here in the Western Balkans. We've seen the great efforts done in the area of humanitarian assistance, immediate protection. They paid off because no one has been left behind. But now the time is ripe for a shift into more long-term solutions when it comes to migration, more identification of people as soon as they enter into the territory, and also identification of what would be the best solutions for them in the Western Balkans, but also beyond, as well as in the countries of origin. So we are going to increasingly work towards this long-term agenda on migration governance with all of you. And with that also, obviously, more investigation, more indictments, more support to the investigation proceedings, and also more use of some of the temporary protection measures that exist in the Western Balkans, in the legal framework in the Western Balkans, for those who have been identified victims of trafficking, so that they can best collaborate with the law and also find the best solution for themselves in line with their best interest. So I want to encourage to look more holistically on the topic of migration as a whole, and specifically trafficking and smuggling. And I hope that a forum like this one and many others will encourage exchanges of best practices, all these critical informal but also formal conversations that allow your work and our work to thrive once we get back to our respective duty stations. So I wish you 2 excellent days ahead of us, and count on IOM going forward. Thank you.